from Alta California. This is an overview of the 2021-2022 purchase of service data from Alta California Regional Center, including review of contextual data, interviews with our 1 to 40 ethnicity specific or language specific case holders, review of public data sets, and the current best practice regarding disparity in purchasing research. So the main slides I want to touch on are this first one, which is the center column is the percentage of the population that each of these ethnic subgroups make up. For point of clarification from some of our feedback, these ethnicity subgroups are dictated by the state of California. Our granular, our small ethnic groups within our data are actually much more diverse than this, but for reasons of accurate comparison, we group them the way that the state of California did. So the center column is the percent of the client population, and the far right column on the upper table is the percent of spending in our purchase of service budget. And then the bottom graph is the disparity either in the positive or negative by percentage points. Now this contrasts pretty markedly with the next slide, which is, again, the center column, the percentage of our client population by a California ethnic subgroup, and the percentage of POS by count. And there was some questions about how exactly those are different, and I've made some additional informational slides that we'll go over at the end. But the takeaway from these two slides is that while the percentage of spending is markedly different, the percentage of POS count and that integral disparity is markedly smaller. But it's still, as we can see in this next one, outside of what we would consider the standard deviation for this data set. So we need to look closely at why these spending differences are occurring. So the next thing we start to do is look at Alta California services and larger service categories by count. So these are the counts of purchases specific to what those purchases are buying for our clients. And you can see transportation is the largest purchase count. Again, not purchase spent, but purchase count, meaning we write the most purchases for transportation. And the lowest is for behavioral support at 3%. We do an overview now of what are the 4 services that make up the most by spending. So housing, which is not the highest count, it's actually the 4th highest, makes up the largest percentage of spending, followed by day program, family home support, and behavioral support. In essence, and in overview, 39% of Alta's purchases by count, again, make up 93% of Alta California's purchase of service spending budget. So why is this important? Well, we start to see a demonstrable difference in what we're thinking of as group choice or group access. So the ethnic subgroup labeled white tends to access family home support and housing roughly the same, with day program and behavioral support following that. The ethnic subgroup labeled Hispanic overwhelmingly accesses family home support, with housing a distant second, then day program and behavioral support 3rd and 4th. The ethnic subgroup labeled Black or African American accesses family home support first, close second is housing, then day program and behavioral support. And then the ethnic subgroup labeled Asian overwhelmingly accesses family home support, a distant second is then housing, 3rd is day program, and 4th is behavioral support. The information that we gather on a macro level is that certain groups are living by percentage in different settings, if you will. And we see that the ethnic subgroup labeled white tends to gravitate towards living situations that overwhelmingly cost more than living at home with parent, family, or guardian. So supported living and community care facility 4 to 6 bed. These are average annual POSs cost markedly more. Then we have a comparison by language. And it's at this stage that I believe Jen is going to break down some information for us.
Thanks, Elijah. Yes, so this slide tells us about the number of clients who speak English versus on the left-hand side versus the number of clients who speak languages other than English. We'll go to the next slide for some more detail here. So much like the state of California, ACRC's clients, families, and employees are diverse. We recognize that it's really important to bridge gaps in service access across our agency. So this means it's important for us to ensure that our employees offer a wide array of languages spoken and that we have employees who understand the cultural diversity of clients served. The slide on the left-hand side, or excuse me, the pie chart on the left-hand side depicts the number and percentage of ACRC staff who are fluent in a second language. We're proud that we have currently 97 staff who are fluent in a second language. In fact, 16% of our staff are bilingual to meet the needs of about 11% of our clients who are also bilingual. Next slide, please. This slide represents the same data, just depicted as in the way that the state of California Department of Developmental Services references data with respect to language. We group the data the same way for the purposes of statistical simplicity. It is important for us to note and acknowledge that the Department of Developmental Services is making a strong push and that there is support to more accurately communicate and share the data in each category. For example, Asian language encompasses a wide array of languages, and other does not tell us about the languages spoken specifically. This work is all part of language access and equity. Next slide, please. As stated before, ACRC's clients, families, and employees are diverse. This slide represents the ethnic demographics of ACRC staff as compared to that of our clients served. Again, we group the data the same way the Department of Developmental Services does for the purposes of statistical simplicity. Other does not fully depict the ethnic demographics of staff or clients. Next slide. So in the spirit of ensuring that we are serving clients in linguistically and culturally diverse ways, we are proud to share that in fall of 2022, we were awarded funds from the American Rescue Plan Act to implement a pilot project titled Culturally and Linguistically Sensitive Services and to enhance provider capacity for the children and families of Early Start. So far, we have served 142 children ages birth to 3 in ways that we haven't been able to serve them before. So part of the pilot project involved being able to offer stipends or incentives to our vendored providers to serve families a little bit differently. One is that, so we had 19 providers, vendors, participate in this pilot project so far. We offered stipends to vendors to provide services to clients who live in remote areas, underserved areas, to serve families and children during non-working hours. For example, we know that it's really difficult for some families to take a few hours off of work to be home for an in-person therapy session with their child and their therapist. So we are offering a stipend to serve children after 4:30 p.m. on federal holidays if the vendor and family are available, and on weekends. Additionally, we're proud to say that we have served 130 children and families in languages other than English who are receiving early start therapies. That could be occupational therapy, speech therapy, or physical therapy. The box on the bottom speaks to the number of vendors who so far have brought on staff members, therapists trained in early start therapies, who are proficient, in languages other than English. Thank you, Elijah.
So this, oh, sorry, Herman. So this slide is meant to demonstrate the comparison between Alta California Regional Center's ethnic and linguistic makeup compared to that of Sacramento County being used as a global benchmark specific to our regional center. This is an important benchmark that we're looking at closely because we know that there is a sort of proven benefit to representation as it pertains to the ethnic and linguistic makeup of your community. So this is something that we're striving towards and looking at closely as we move forward. And some of those efforts now are going to be outlined by Michelle Johnson.
Good afternoon, everybody. Service Access and Equity Grant. So what is it? It is a $11 million annual pot of money awarded to regional centers and community-based organizations, also known as CBOs, to implement strategies to reduce the purchase of service disparities and increase access to services. This slide depicts by fiscal year the amount of money that has been awarded to regional centers and community-based organizations. The far right column depicts by fiscal year the amount of money that has been awarded to Alta California Regional Center. Fiscal year 16-17, you might notice in the top row, the money was only awarded to regional centers, and every year since then it has been awarded to both regional centers and community-based organizations. In 2021, fiscal year 2021-22, you will notice a zero. ACRC did put forward a proposal, then learned it was very similar to the ARPA Part C pilot that Jennifer Bloom just described. So we withdrew the proposal to prevent duplication. Also important for you to know that many of these projects, these service access and equity grant projects, are multi-year grants, meaning they occur over many years. So why is this important? When you total up the columns, just over $88 million has been spent. 68% of funds have been awarded to community-based organizations and 32% awarded to regional centers. And $451,000 has been awarded to ACRC. Service access and equity grants are shared, and together we are working to make progress and move the needle toward increasing service access. And last but not least, DDS has contracted with Georgetown University to assess the effectiveness of the service access and equity grants, and we are looking forward to the findings and recommendations that are expected to be released in a couple of weeks. Thank you, Elijah.
And then I believe Herman is going to present the next slide.
Thanks, Elijah. So who are some of those community partners that Alta's working with that have received funds from the department to connect with the diverse communities that we serve. We have Hub, the Hmong Center, working on a grant project titled Learning the Hmong Way, which is putting information and material into the Hmong language for that community to learn about the regional center, how to access services and destigmatize the condition of a developmental disability. Last week, I wasn't able to announce what I'm able to share with you this week, which is Alta has appointed its newest cultural diversity specialist. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. And introduce you virtually. All right. Introduce you to Shamir Griffin. This is a bio that was written about him on our website that he was willing to share about 6 months ago. He's now been with the Regional Center for about a year. He's a great individual, and as our cultural diversity specialist, he will be responsible for working with the department on implementing the grants that we've been approved for this year. And I'm going to go ahead and drop in the chat a link to our website where you can see Shamir's bio. It'll need to be updated because he was initially a service coordinator with us and now will be our cultural diversity specialist. So one of the new grant projects that we'll be implementing this year is a partnership with La Familia Counseling Center and Hmong Youth and Parents United. They will be hiring intake navigators, individuals who will assist families who are Spanish speaking or Hmong speaking with navigating Alta's intake and eligibility determination process. This was a project that came to light when our former cultural diversity specialist, Maiji Her, who came from our intake department, recognized that families who have English as a second language can sometimes encounter challenges with obtaining records, scheduling appointments, keeping appointments, understanding information that's required to navigate the intake and eligibility determination process. So these individuals will be both linguistically and culturally able to connect with our Spanish-speaking and Hmong-speaking families. One of our grant projects that's coming to conclusion this year is our partnership with Futures Explored Film and Media Program. And they've put together video modules in 2 different languages and featuring families of our African-American Black communities who are receiving some more commonly accessed services, 8 different services in total. The other languages that those services are being featured in are Spanish and Hmong, and they feature clients and families who speak that language, sharing the benefits of those resources being brought into their homes. One thing I didn't mention last week that I think is worthy of highlighting, and it's something that didn't cost the regional center a dime really, was the creation of our internal diversity outreach work group. That was the brainchild of our executive director, Lori Benalis, who wanted to draw on the strengths of our diverse staff who are familiar with different resources in the community and build upon those relationships at a systemic level by engaging in outreach, identifying partners whom we might be able to do cross-training or invite ourselves to events where there would be resource fairs where we can have a booth featuring Alta California Regional Center. And we've done quite a bit of that since the inception of the Diversity Outreach Work Group. And that will be another committee that Shamir Griffin, our new cultural diversity specialist, will chair in his new role.
I'm going to unmute myself and have Herman mute himself. There we go. So the solutions, we're really focused on outcomes versus features. And what does that mean? So how do we ensure that we're empowering choice for every Alta California Regional Center client? One of the things that doing a comprehensive review of the quantitative data allows us to do is to focus the engagement where we see our system deficits. A lot of this was covered with our CBO partnerships, expanding after hours access, expanding the reach of our 1 to 40 specialists, and ongoing discussions about how to increase public access to these specialists and how to do more comprehensive, nuanced outreach to our disparate communities. In terms of access and system fluency, how do we provide equal access to all disparate groups? This goes back a lot to increased outreach and focusing on relying on our CBO and our community partners to do more community-driven and global solutions. And then purchase power versus personal choice. There are some market forces that we don't have a lot of control over, but what we are focusing on is getting as much input as we can in those communities that our data shows us are markedly underserved, and then getting more input overall, which was part of the reason we put out a survey following this, and we will address some of the returns on that survey as well. And building what we're calling additive to multiplicative solutions. So right now we have a system that is very, very individualized for a reason. That's we want everyone to feel like they have individual choices. But with one problem and one person working on that problem, they take one action, and so we get one solution. As we focus on these systemic issues, we need to become a multiplier system, meaning we need research and predictive trend analysis to give us a conceptually informed and culturally nuanced approach to these problems, so that when we take actions, they can be actions that don't just address one problem, but maybe a multiple of problems, and can lead to a variety of solutions, thereby giving people and clients specifically more flexibility in the outcomes that can come from our services. I did see one thing drop into chat, and I created a few extra slides for today specifically. So these are additional metrics and demonstrations. So this is, I feel like, a pretty finite demonstration of what we found in the data, which is as clients get older and they choose to move out of the family home, the average cost increases. Now, this isn't divided specifically by ethnicity. This is to show that we found this correlation in the data, which supports some of the other findings that we had, which is the groups that tend to choose later in life, in adulthood, to move out of their family home by virtue of it costing more to live outside of a family home, have a larger POS budget annually. And then there was additionally a question about what exactly is POS spending disparity versus POS count disparity. So excuse my rather broad metaphor here, but suppose that we all got to choose one meal. So on the left, you'll see every meal costs a different amount of money. Depending on what meal you choose, that will largely dictate how much that meal costs. But on the right, you see everyone got to choose. Some people chose, in this instance, a hamburger or whatever this fish is meant to represent. And some people chose something relatively inexpensive, like a donut, or this child chose ice cream. The same can be true when you generalize to housing. assuming that folks have open choice of housing, you'll see care homes and, for instance, an ICF-DDN, a care facility specific to nursing needs, they cost markedly more than, for instance, someone living with very little support staff in their own apartment, or a child living at their family home. While the disparity may show up in spending, the disparity by POS count all but disappears. Again, this is a gross generalization, but it's meant to give a more clear depiction of what those two metrics mean. Disparity of spending is the difference between the average or equanimity spending by dollar, and disparity in count is literally counting every single purchase that each person gets and getting an average count by our population. So at this point, I think I'm going to hand it back to Herman, and we're going to entertain some questions.
Thanks, Elijah. And we do have 2 additional presentations, but we can open it up. People can unmute themselves. They can't turn their cameras on, so we can't see them, but people are able to unmute their microphones. And I know there were questions in the chat asking for further clarification, distinction between POS count and POS expenditure as measures. So I hope Elijah's analogy and further description helped clarify that. And anybody at any time can put in the chat or unmute their microphone and propose suggestions for ways in which Alta may enhance service access and equity to its client population. Again, these meetings have historically been where ideas for new service access and equity grant proposals stem from. And even though the idea of enhanced rates for early intervention services didn't become a service access and equity grant, as Jennifer mentioned, it was realized as a enhancement through the ARPA program. So we want to hear from stakeholders, community members, either via chat or unmuting their microphones. And we'll also, we've got a hand raised. Or Karen, are you able to unmute your microphone?
I have unmuted it. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi,
Okay,
Karen.
good. Hi, I'm Karen Mulvaney. Thanks for all of the data that you presented. Lots of good things going on. Really happy to see the American Rescue Plan having launched last fall. And initial comment, please let us know next year how that helped individuals that couldn't gain access to services because they needed after hours services or something like that, participate in Early Start for the first time. I think that's really going to be illuminating. On the POS count data, a couple of things. I can understand why it's important for everyone to understand how many clients have at least some access to services. But I think that the disparity data in the dollar spent is still important. So, for example, if you're Hmong and you only get 20% of your needs met, while, on average, white clients get 80% of their needs met, this disparity isn't going to show up in the POS data, but something's going on there, and it's important for us to dig into that and figure out what that might be. And what those barriers might be. If it's a choice, it's either a choice or it's a barrier, and it's important to know and collect the data on what that might be. And I'm glad to see that you broke down the data into age groups, because that in the past has been a major reason why we've seen some differences in spending between one ethnic group and another. For example, the Hispanic group, as I recall, tends to be on average younger than the white population of our clients. And for that reason, the spending looked lower, but once you broke it down into age groups, it disappeared. Those differences disappeared because it was entirely due to the age of the average age of the population. It's important for us to, have seen that that is an important factor. The other thing I wanted to ask you to do is I'd suggest that you rename housing something like living supports. And the reason is that I'm just really afraid that individuals and families are going to look at housing and think that the regional center actually funds housing when it does not. And even in residential facilities, for example, it's the client's SSI income that funds the housing component. And the reason is that families and individuals need to understand that they have to take action in another way to secure housing supports for themselves if they want to live outside of the family home. And so I just am concerned that this is going to create some confusion, or that families might look at this and say, oh, I guess I don't need to worry about housing for my family member. So let's maximize clarification if possible when we're looking at those kinds of things. I have other comments, but I don't want to hog the comment period, so maybe I'll circle back later.
I appreciate that input, Maureen. Those are great points, and we'll certainly take note of that and make sure we're clear on what we're trying to communicate.
I just
Karen, sorry, I said Maureen.
I just want to mention, Karen, that's actually a really great point about the nuance of how data is labeled, and we had another response to the survey talking about the broad nature of the categorization, which is why I went into a little bit of how we group them and why we group them by state data. But you make a very, very good point, which is the nuance of how we communicate this is as important in some instances as what we communicate. So thank you for that. I've made note of that. That's an excellent recommendation.
I think one of the other important ideas to share is that with having brought Elijah on board and what he's been able to do as far as data analysis, he can find and pinpoint really anything of interest to anyone at the regional center. And if there are people in the community who have information that they'd like to see presented, what we've done historically has been the presentation of the data that's available in the consistent statewide compilation report that's consistent across the state. And it was really just last year that we began drilling down and looking at what service codes and categories we were purchasing things in. And it was done in a little bit of a crude way of just looking at service codes on an Excel spreadsheet. But what Elijah's work has enabled us to do is almost with instantaneous results, plug in questions that we want answers to and find out what the data tells us. So in addition to ideas of changes and innovative, creative approaches that we might consider, if there are questions that you've thought of that we haven't previously been able to answer because the data is just too dense and immense, we now have the ability to extract that much more easily. We also shared a survey at the conclusion of our first meeting, asking what people thought about the presentation, how the information was presented. And I think Elijah touched on some of that and clarified. But that survey also asked for input on ideas of how Alta can make some improvements or engage in additional activities. So we continue to encourage suggestions on that topic. And before the end of the meeting today, we'll share our email address that is open year-round continually for soliciting input from the community with ideas on topics of improved service access and equity. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to our directors, Jennifer Bloom and Michelle Johnson, for a presentation on our restored social and recreational services that we hope will be accessed by our diverse populations. Oh, but before that, I'll ask Maureen if she's willing to unmute her microphone or if she'd like to type her question in the chat.
Can you hear me? I thought I unmuted.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. What I really like about this year's compared to other years is you're sharing the YouTube video with everyone and sending out the slides of the presentation last week. That is very, very helpful. And I hope those will stay up at the Alta website. I'm trying to understand. I went in and looked at consumers with no purchase of services, and I'm rounding, but this year it was 22, or for the year of data we're looking at, it was 22%. And in 2021, it was 18%. And even for the adults, it was 17% versus 15%. Are we not purchasing? Do we have any idea of why we're not purchasing services? And there were some disparities by race that were ethnicity that were pretty strong. What's going on? Are there services not available, waiting lists, or what?
Those are questions we can attempt to dig into further and try to identify. Perhaps it's age related. Maybe those are children whose needs are being met through generic resources and natural supports, where regional centers tend to take a back seat. But we can do further examination of those specific individuals that make up the group that have no purchase of services. Those are individuals who, if they're members of diverse populations, are assigned to our newly developed 1 to 40 caseloads. Can be, right. They can choose and elect not to. And many of our clients, we find, are quite comfortable with their current service coordinator on a traditional caseload, and value that relationship that they formed and don't want to be treated any differently. However, there are those that have migrated to the 1 to 40 caseloads with more specialized case management attention and support from those service coordinators. And again, what we're hearing is that there's an interest in having more community level engagement. And at the individual level, it's not necessarily regional center purchases that are being sought or aren't necessarily the desired end outcome for those individuals.
If I can too, just additionally, when I was looking at the data, some of the no purchase data is skewed as well. I came from, prior to this role, I'd been at the regional center for 15 years, and I was the developmental center liaison. And what I did was case management specific to those clients that were in state developmental centers or state prisons or local jails. Those clients that unfortunately find themselves involved in the criminal justice system or for one reason or another in a state facility typically have no purchases unless they are court ordered and meant towards the restoration of competency. But these are all really good questions that we should be taking a closer look at. So thank you, Maureen. The more we can ask these very finite questions about what are the demographics, the status codes, the living situations of clients with zero purchases, the more we can drill in and try to find some causal relationship between those clients and some other factor that we're not looking close enough at.
Thank you.
Very well. Thank you.
And Karen put some great information in the chat in response to Maureen's comment with regard to recognizing we were still in the midst of a COVID impacted fiscal year This fiscal data is always a reflection, a look in the rearview mirror of funds that were spent during the prior year. So alternative services were still being funded, which meant providers could deliver services in alternative formats, not necessarily the face-to-face or brick and mortar service delivery, which meant services could be delivered remotely via Zoom. And sometimes we found that highlighted the divide in the technological accessibility or just interest in receiving services in a remote fashion. So with the conclusion of alternative service delivery, December 31st of 2022, we're hoping to resume as much as possible normal service delivery if we can continue to address and work towards workforce enhancement, another initiative that Alta's actively engaged in. Thanks. Stacy, did you want to unmute your mic?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so my name is Stacy and I'm with Lu Mong Center. I was not able to present last week. I was out sick and no one else on my team was able to present, but we are I don't have too much feedback, but just to kind of redirect what Learning the Hmong Way does. It does focus on the Hmong community. And sometimes we find that there's other needs in the Southeast Asian population. We are based in Merced, but we are partnered with Alta California Regional Center as well. And I do want to say that our direct services are towards regional center staff or service coordinators who serve Hmong clients to make that bigger impact in the community and to increase the access and care for Hmong families. And so I was just saying that I wasn't able to present last week, but just a little brief introduction of who we are. And so yes, our focus is in the Hmong community, and we do have partnerships with other community-based organizations that are non-Hmong as well. And so, yeah, please let me know if you have any questions as well.
Thank you, Stacy. Glad you're feeling better. Glad you're able to join us today. And thanks for that added information. So at this point, if we want to turn it over to Jennifer and Michelle, our directors of client services, they have a presentation on the restoration of social recreational services.
Thank you, Herman. I'll go ahead and get started. You can move us to the next slide, please. So if you haven't heard already, we're happy to spread the word and share that social recreation and camp services have been restored. So back in 2009, regional centers were prohibited from purchasing camp or related expenses, social rec, non-medical therapies, unless the client met criteria for an exemption. And on July 1st, 2021, regional centers' authority to purchase these services was restored. We're really excited about this. We understand the importance of social recreation in the lives of children, clients, families, and we're committed to spreading the word and sharing information. We use every opportunity we can to provide outreach around social recreation and camping services. Next slide, please. So I touched on this a little bit already, but just want to emphasize that we know that social recreation activities is essential for the health, for our mental health, physical health, socialization skills, and that we want our clients to be able to have opportunities to participate in community organizations, like, for example, through their Park and Rec district, to attend, to be fully included in social recreation opportunities in their own community, and not in a segregated or a one-on-one type situation. I think of an example when I was a service coordinator. I worked with a young lady, she was a teenager at the time, and always proud to talk to me about her soccer team that she joined through the city of Sacramento. She would show me her jersey. She talked about her friends, when she, you know, just the plays that she made on the field. And she was just really passionate about her opportunity. And I could just see her flourish And every time I saw her, she would tell me more stories about her experience on her soccer team. And later, as she became into high school age and ready to get a job, really because of her relationships and her self-confidence, she got a job at a local Round Table Pizza in her neighborhood. And I really, we talked about how wonderful it was that she had those opportunities to get to know people in her neighborhood, to build her communication skills and her confidence to be able to be a part of a team and understand what it's like to be in a working environment too. And so I really think about her a lot and how those skills that she learned in her social recreation opportunity really translated to her job skills later on. A little bit about our service definitions and settings. So this is just an example of what social recreational services or activities might include. So we talk about how the purpose would be for promoting personal enjoyment, healthy lifestyles, interactions, self-esteem, community integration. And I mentioned Park and Recreation District, that's one way. Our clients might also be able to participate in YMCA, Special Olympics, scouting, any type of social recreation activity or anything that you can think of that's extracurricular or available in the community would count or could be defined as a social rec activity. Oh, Herman, I'm sorry. I muted to cough for a second. Excuse me. I want to talk about the settings real quick. So we have full inclusion and a segregated or a non-segregated activity or a non-medical therapy. So full inclusion, of course, is what it sounds like. So that means that our clients would have full access to participate with their greater community and to engage in all of the services available to them. Sometimes our clients, as they prepare to get ready to participate in a fully included activity, might need a segregated activity. They might need a little extra one-on-one support and then kind of wean off of that to be slowly integrated into a full inclusion setting. We also know that some non-medical therapies might be exclusively delivered in a setting with their disabled peers. So there might be a music therapy group for children with autism that all participate together in that therapeutic music setting. Okay, Herman, thank you. And camp, it's camping season already. We're very excited. We've had a year to really work on vendoring and getting more experience in understanding what camps are available, what the requirements might be, how to best support our clients and families in going to camp. We have opportunities for day camp and overnight camp. So we've received a lot of really beautiful success stories, pictures from clients and families who participated last summer, and we're looking forward to more of that this year. Thank you, Herman.
All right, I had to unmute myself. As Jen shared, we have been promoting social recreation in the community, also with our staff and our providers. And so this slide really speaks to the opportunities that our clients that are in residential placement have. Again, we wanted to ensure that clients residing in care homes have access to camp. And so there are 3 potential paths for a client in a facility to attend. And again, we describe these so that when clients go to camp, that there's no that we don't duplicate purchases of service. So the client can attend a day or overnight camp funded by the community care facility. And in that instance, ACRC will consider funding the cost that exceeds the client's cost for placement. ACRC will fund the day or overnight camp, and the CCF does not bill for residential services during this time, or the client and community care facility work together to mutually create a camp experience. And some examples of that are weekend camping trips, fishing trips, day trips, excursions, etc. We also wanted to dedicate a slide because prior to the restoration of social recreation, we know that some of our residential service providers used to support clients going to camp by saving up a portion of their Social Security funds every month. And so again, we developed this slide to just make sure that everyone has, all of our clients have access to social rec camp experience, and that ACRC, again, and the provider will work together to ensure that the client has access to attend. A couple more opportunities are, let's see, socialization training. And this is a service that has been available since prior to these services going away in 2000. This is based, so socialization is an opportunity with peers. I'm sorry, let me start over. Socialization training. This is a service that has been available. It is a group-based opportunity with peers for individuals to build their skills and to build social boundaries. The goal is really to increase access to services and relationship build in the community. A non-medical therapy is a assistance provided by non-medical personnel to benefit a client's mind and body. Examples of non-medical may include, but are not limited to, specialized recreation programs, art, music, dance. We've also seen approved a fair amount of services related to swimming, gymnastics, equestrian therapy, art, music, etc. So some of the desired outcomes are increased utilization and access to social recreation services. Again, this just goes back to integration into the community for our clients in the community with non-disabled peers. Support and training to people who facilitate and provide services. That speaks to our vendors that provide services. And again, we've conducted these PowerPoint with entities such as Sacramento Parks and Rec, again, really wanting to spread the word to help really build our pool of vendors. Accessibility and community integration, that just again speaks to participation and access for our clients. Support for individuals with varying needs. We know that some of our clients are going to need specialized support in order to participate, such as an aide or a supplemental support staff. Again, that is something that the regional center is committed to funding if any of our clients have a specialized need. Also, strong partnerships with community organizations. Again, I mentioned that we have met individually with some of the local park and rec departments to really build that partnership, because again, our goal is to create vendors so that they are able to serve our clients in this particular area. All right, and so we are committed to promoting this initiative, securing a variety of vendor providers to meet your social rec and camp needs, sharing information about available resources and camp opportunities, outreach to spread the word about this opportunity, and also present to stakeholders through public meetings. So our presentation today was part of our outreach plan that we submitted to the department to really ensure that individuals from diverse communities are aware of social rec services. And so we thank you for your time. And are there any questions?
Michelle, there was a question in chat
Okay.
from Royisha. I can read it. says at this time there are no camp services vendors listed in Alta's provider directory. Are there any vendor camp services at this time? How long is the vendorization process for camp service providers? And what should an individual do if they desire to attend camp this July, but the camp is not currently vendored?
Okay, so to the first question, do we have camps vendored? Yes, we do. And I would suggest that you contact the service coordinator. They will know what resources are currently vendored, and they can certainly, again, help our client with identifying camps for them to attend. So I think the best next step would be to reach out to the service coordinator, and we can certainly share with you what is vendored. And again, for those instances where, because we are still building our vendor pool, and so if there's a resource or if there's a camp that interests you, again, bring that to the attention of the service coordinator. In many instances, we are working with families to ensure that clients attend, and sometimes that's through a purchase reimbursement if the camp is not vendored. So reach out to the service coordinator.
Thanks, Michelle. I think that provided the answer to the question. There was another question about clients who are already in the SDP self-determination program. Could they use social recreation support? Yes,
That is something that we are building into SDP budgets. So again, the answer to that is yes, and I would suggest that you reach out to the service coordinator.
All right. And we'll see what we can do about getting those vendored camps advertised a little more publicly. There's a follow-up question also wanting to know how much the budget for social recreation is for each client and how it could be decided.
So that is really individualized. And so I think, again, I couldn't share with you how much a budget is, because it is really dependent on the client interests, what needs they have, and it's really individualized. So I don't know if that's helpful to you, but that is how we approach, adding monies to the budget for social rec. And I will ask Tracy Brown or Faye Tate, who are our associate directors of client services, if they have anything to add to what I've already shared related to SDP and accessing social recreation.
Nothing really to add. Hi, this is Faye. Nothing really to add. It's just as it is with traditional services. We assess the need and see what the goal is and move it right on forward from there.
Thanks, Faye.
All right. Well, thank you, Michelle and Jennifer, for review of social recreational services. I know it's also something we've added to our IPP signature page, so should be part of discussion, every conversation, at every planning team meeting. Just a reminder that that service is available and something to consider being discussed by the planning team. The next service that we wanted to focus on and highlight is a newly launched pilot of an entirely new service code. It didn't exist last year. And we have a member of our Community Services and Supports Department, Jason Scantleberry, who's overseeing the vendorization of coordinated family support. And at this time, I'll invite Jason if he'd like to unmute himself, and not sure if he has any material he wants to show on screen, but he can share his screen.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation for this service. Okay, so coordinated family support services. It's service code 076. Service overview is tailored to the unique needs of the consumer and their family, providing assistance and training for the consumer and their family in navigating comprehensive services and supports that are tailored to meet their unique needs, including creative pathways to overcome barriers to accessing generic resources and other resources. It's provided in a manner that respects their language and culture, primarily provided in a person's home and community. Minimum qualifications for staff and supervisors are set in the service description. Coordinated family support shall not replace or duplicate regional center service coordination, generic resources, or any other regional center funded service. At minimum, the need for coordinated family supports shall be assessed annually, with progress being reported quarterly. Coordinated family support services. This includes assisting with scheduling of service delivery, including medical and other appointments, identifying transportation options or services, identifying backup providers, supports, and providing those backup direct supports when the plan fails, providing futures planning for the consumer, including those living with aging caregivers, providing training to the consumer, which maximizes their independence, coordinating consistency and training across providers specific to the needs of the consumer and their family. The case management referral process. So who's eligible for this service? Adults 18 years or older that are currently living with the family. Planning team meeting to determine if coordinated family supports is appropriate. The service coordinator will authorize coordinated family supports assessment under service code 073 for a maximum of 6 to 12 hours. The service coordinator completes the referral and service need assessment. The service coordinator, service coordinator completed referral is section 1. Coordinated family supports provider completes assessment, which is in section 2. The service coordinator will be required to complete quarterly reviews if coordinated family support services are being utilized. Service provider process. After a referral for coordinated family support service is made, the coordinated family supports provider meets with the individual and their family to develop a plan of action that includes which coordinated family support services are needed as identified in the assessment. The referral and assessment tool is returned to the regional center service coordinator, who will determine the authorized number of hours for the plan of action. When the service is authorized, the coordinated family supports provider may begin working with the consumer and their family on the identified plan of action. The coordinated family supports provider reports progress quarterly using the reporting tool. Consumer family satisfaction feedback. A flyer with a link and a QR code will complete an online survey will be distributed to consumers within 30 days of starting coordinated family supports. The flyer will also contain a phone number for those that need assistance with completing the survey. Responses will be submitted directly to DDS to assess the effectiveness of coordinated family supports. All responses will be kept confidential. Any future survey will be sent directly from DDS to the consumer. Informational webinar. DDS has some informational webinars on their site. We have a coordinated family supports PowerPoint, as well as coordinated family supports PowerPoint for families and their advocates and consumers. There's DDS webinars available in English and American Sign Language, as well as Spanish. And then any questions?
Thank you, Jason. I didn't see any questions come up in chat. I can share the department, DDS, has also come up with a fact sheet on coordinated family support, and I can drop a link to that in the chat for folks to access. And I'm going to share my screen real quickly before we open it up to some more questions and comments. So this is the fact sheet that the department has come up with, and I've dropped that link in the chat. We haven't put our regional center logo on the form yet, but we will, and we'll have this posted on our website. But as Elijah mentioned, and as it was pointed out in his presentation of the data, I just want to share the raw data that was put together and shared for the consistency and formatting with all the other regional centers. And this is the annual per capita expenditure broken down based just on living arrangement. And we've always noticed this discrepancy between the annual costs of clients who live with home parent or guardian, which does include quite a few children who are getting their needs met through generic resources. But by comparison, the 1,700 clients that live in our more expensive settings, we spend over $100,000 a year more on individuals, clients in those settings. So that's really what this new pilot service is intended to address, is that disparity and the additional support that families may need or benefit from having and coordinating the services in the family home. So this being a pilot, it's not guaranteed to exist in perpetuity, but hopefully with some positive outcomes, as Jason was describing with those surveys and tracking the data, will demonstrate some success with the use of this program. As new as it is, it's also something that Alta is working to develop vendorizations with providers. So we have RFPs, requests for proposals on our website, and are actively working to get providers available to deliver this service. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Question from Karen: will CFS providers coordinate consistency in training across providers for IHSS providers too? Karen, I want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly, meaning that the manner in which different direct service providers that come into the family home interact with the client would have some consistency as far as communication and application of things like consistency of behavioral support.
Well, so I'm just quoting directly from the slide point that states, quote, coordinating consistency and training across providers specific to the needs of the consumer and their family, and as one of the CFS services. And the reason why I raised that is, if I remember correctly, I think DDS in their training for coordinated family services indicated that there would not be wraparound type coordination of IHSS for CFS the way that there is in SLS.
They definitely drew a distinction between CFS and SLS, as not to confuse the two. CFS is not SLS delivered in the family home. And I don't know if Jason can speak to any more clarity on that question.
Yes, that's correct.
So in other words, families need to know that they will still be required to manage IHSS providers separately if they do choose CFS as a service.
Yes, it would be separate.
I just think that's an important point to make sure people are aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to commit within the hour to have posted on our website our list of vendored camps that have been provided to me. We think we'll put them on our social recreational activities camp and non-medical therapies restored page that's posted. So I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat. Right now, it just provides information on those services being restored. We'll soon have posted there a list of our vendored camps as well. So I'll again open it up, having heard some new information about CFS, new pilot service. We had some questions already about that, but interested in hearing if there are any ideas or suggestions on ways in which Alta might improve engagement, increase service access and equity. And we've already had some suggestions on different ways to take deeper dives into the data that's available to us. And I'm going to put in the chat the email address. It's posequity@altaregional.org. That email address is monitored continuously for any questions, concerns, suggestions, ideas, input. So we hope you'll take time to formulate some thoughts and share with us any ideas that you have. All right. Karen, you're so polite. You got your hand up.
I
These-
do.
These silences, I feel like people should just jump in, but Elijah noticed your hand, so.
Thanks, Elijah. I just think that the coordinated family services pilot is, I'm excited about it as a possible means to achieve more equity in living supports. Because I do think in supported living services, the requirement for independent housing that only, families with financial resources can usually fund does create a disparity between different ethnic groups there. And so this being a service where the regional center is able to provide more services in the family home, I'm hopeful that will help reduce some of those disparities that we see arising out of supported living services. And so I'd love to see some emphasis on looking at that data as the system rolls out. I will say that I've heard from providers that they're having so much difficulty recruiting support staff as it is, that they're kind of reluctant to take on CFS vendorization at this point in time. So I hope that changes over time. But, my personal fear is that this is going to take a while before vendors will be in a position to take this on, because they're struggling to staff, the current vendors in other services like SLS or ILS or respite or things like that.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that, and not that it should be the only option or solution, but I always encourage families that have access to networks of supports to consider self-determination as an option when staffing issues are the barrier, scarcity of resources, but that still requires that the family and the client have those connections and relationships to people who can do the work, the important work that needs to be done. I mentioned an initiative that Alta is engaged in. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but we're partnering with Valley Mountain Regional Center, hosting some job fairs for direct service employees, inviting our vendors who are in need of those important direct care staff to come together, create a opportunity for people interested in that field of work to get hired and streamline things. We're also working on developing a website specific to employment of direct service providers. So that's another thing that Alta's partnering with our vendor community and Valley Mountain as well on that.
Very exciting news. And I'll also say that it's really difficult to transition into supported living services from the family home when you need 24/7 care, because that means you have to pull an entire team together, which just doesn't happen overnight. And so the ability, you know, if an SLS provider is also vendored for CFS, that transition is going to be much easier, where they can pull a team together while still in the family home under CFS and then transition to SLS whenever housing is available.
Yeah, I would think there would be some benefit to build on existing infrastructures and take advantage of potential for continuity of familiarity of client needs across different service codes, but perhaps staying with the same vendored service provider.
Right.
Not sure if how easily staff can transition, but at least there might be a warm handoff and existing knowledge within that vendor system. All right. I'm not seeing anything new in the chat. I will share that link that I posted to our social and rec services on our website has been updated and now includes camp and social recreation master list of the current social rec services that we have vendored. So you're welcome to click on that and take a look at some of those resources.
Great.
We are approaching the 3:30 time when we scheduled to end the meeting. I don't want to cut things short, so I'm happy to sit here for 5 minutes and just see if anything comes to anybody they want to put in chat. Again, looking for questions related to any of the information that we've shared, suggestions, ideas for new grant projects where we could use funds to develop creative, innovative resources for enhanced access for our clients. Things that we can do that don't cost money. Our diversity outreach work group continually working to just build on existing partnerships, relationships with our community-based organizations, identify new programs that might serve or support diverse populations that we can establish new relationships with. Well, I want to thank our translators and interpreters as well. Thank you, Marlene, Angela, and Giovanna.
You're welcome. It's good working with you again.
Yes, you're welcome.
Appreciate you. All right, well, we've got 31 participants left. People haven't been scared away by the silence. They're hanging on to see if anybody's brave and bold enough to unmute their mic with one last suggestion or idea or question. That's what we're here for.
Somebody's in the chat box.
Oh, thank you. Maureen, great suggestion. Something we have to do anyway. It's a public document. And we do have the list of attendees. So the request to send our report to the department with all participants here. All right, yeah, we'll make sure we follow the steps required to get that report approved by the department. And once we post it on our website, we will certainly make that available to everyone who participated in either or both of these meetings. Well, thank you again for your time. Please use that email account, posequity@altaregional.org. If you think of anything, if anything comes to you tonight while you're unpacking everything we talked about, we'll look forward to hearing from you. And even though we do this meeting once a year, we certainly consider this a continuous round the clock, year-long effort of engagement. So keep the lines of communication open. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the meeting for all.